Is this it? Is this the end? What sequence of events brought me to this point? What abhorrent circumstances led me here? Is this the cruel, painful plan that was orchestrated by a malevolent deity? Who am I really? What purpose did I serve in this life that was granted to me? I suppose I'll never know.
But I'm not done yet!
Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah.
So, all silly intros aside, I do really want to talk about extreme ultraviolet lithography today. So, those of you active in the tech community, maybe reading around the forums, might have read this term around somewhere, talking about how it's the next level of chip fabrication. And the people that wrote that would be right. It was touted as such since 2005, where some people have predicted this technology would actually be rolled out on a wide scale. But as is apparent, over a decade later, this is just not the case. So what happened to it? And what is it in the first place? In understanding just how this lithography presents such a large improvement over current processes, let's understand how lithography even works in a processor. When we talk about the lithography of a processor, we're essentially speaking about the manufacturing process of these integrated circuits. At this point, the industry is advanced enough where light is used to etch a geometric pattern into the substrate, which is some kind of thin silicone or some other composite piece. This geometric pattern is basically what makes up an integrated circuit. The things that power your phone, computer, router, everything. But not all light is created equal. Even though at the moment we're using ultraviolet light already, the wavelength of ultraviolet light is quite massive, relatively speaking at least. This very day, many of the processors from Intel to AMD use a process called deep ultraviolet lithography, which uses light from 193 nanometers to 248 nanometers. This is done using technologies like argon fluoride immersion, argon fluoride dry light sources, and the predecessor to that, which is the krypton fluoride light sources. It's all simple chemistry. Now, we've basically abused the crap out of this process already and reached the point where the fin pitches and widths are extremely low considering this kind of light. The fin pitches are down to 40 nanometer and widths down to 8 nanometer. And so it's time to move on to something bigger, or rather, smaller. TSMC has noted that they will continue to use 193 nanometer light into 7 nanometer process, but some fabrications have already projected a jump ship to extreme ultraviolet lithography, such as Samsung and Intel with their own bouts with 7 nanometer. Now, just how much smaller will this new extreme ultraviolet light be compared to deep ultraviolet light? It will actually be 13.5 nanometers as compared to the 193 nanometers that we're currently using right now. At least that's the projected number. Wow, isn't that amazing? But how come we haven't got chips with this kind of lithographic process despite having definite research dating as far back as the early 2000s? And even some people predicting it would come out as early as 2005. Where is it? It's because on the microfab scale of things don't move that fast. Extreme ultraviolet lithography is just inherently super complicated in the implementation over a large scale. Extreme ultraviolet light is at a wavelength where literally everything will absorb it, even air. So basically, completely new fabrication plants would be necessary because the use of extreme ultraviolet lithography requires things like vacuums for which the chips to be manufactured in. Oh, and a massive amount of power. Right now, the lasers which are used to etch lithography into silicon need the ability to shoot 200 watts per centimeter of area. That's not much, relatively speaking. If we were to use extreme ultraviolet lithography, we would need 10 to the 11 watts per centimeter. And there's more inherent issues than just power with this technology. Because of how extreme ultraviolet light employs the use of mirrors and other diffractory things that could potentially cause asymmetry, especially in the etching of parallel lines. Take a look at the process of using deep ultraviolet light and extreme ultraviolet light. Extreme ultraviolet lithography is just so much more complicated with the necessary use of mirrors and lenses in order to project the geometry of a chip onto the silicon wafer. This complication is simply why the technology has not been able to be rolled out on a wide scale yet. Let's take a look to some of the inherent issues with using such complicated technology for lithography. One of the first inherent issues are what are called stochastic effects, which is essentially the idea that the more one thing is exposed to another, the higher the chance of a specific result of happening. And cancer is one of the most prominent examples of stochastic effects. The more one sits next to a source of radiation, the higher chance that they have for cancer, like leukemia or skin cancer. And basically, the more extreme ultraviolet light is used in a lithographic process, the higher chance of issues with the patterning occur. The result from exposing photoresists to extreme ultraviolet light have a great chance of having differing outcomes, which is why parallel lines have a higher chance of being drawn as not parallel. And because issues in extreme ultraviolet light are more based on random events than design flaws, there's an especially large issue with rolling out this technology because it's so much harder to target the issues which are associated with it. There are also issues and imperfections in creating lines with current extreme ultraviolet lithography fabrication plants. This is referred to as line edge roughness, or LER. And sure, this is an issue currently, but on the level of lithography as low as 10 nanometer, the imperfections that are created from extreme ultraviolet light are just as big as the original intended geometry, which brings about massive issues because the original intended geometry is essentially lost completely. And researchers know what they're trying to get when they're going beneath 10 nanometer as far as line edge roughness goes, but with current technology, they've simply not been able to get what they want. And in the end, this will all be left up to researchers at Intel, AMD, and ASML. Industry predictions pinpoint extreme ultraviolet lithography as coming out in the next couple of years, possibly in 2020, and I do see this as happening because of the heavy amount of research that's already gone into it and these kind of industry predictions. And one thing is for sure though, the race will be very interesting, and I'll be keeping my eye out for more news and bringing it to this channel as soon as possible. Thank you for watching this video, and have a nice day.